Hi everyone, welcome back. So this is Deepavali morning. A very happy Deepavali or Diwali, no matter where you are. Hope we all have a very blessed celebration ahead. With that said, this is going to be the best video ever probably that I've made in this year. So this is the Nokia X30 5G. It is going to be available in many more markets in time to come. This is the Nokia 8.3 and this is the Nokia 9 Pureview. Now, as it is, you can already guess this is going to be a battle of the Pureviews. These are the latest 3 Pureviews under HMD Global's direction. Now, for those of you who are not familiar, this is the Nokia 9 Pureview, Nokia 8.3 5G, which has a Pureview setup, and the Nokia X30 5G, which also has a Pureview setup. What's interesting is that HMD Global says that the Nokia X30 5G has the best Pureview experience to date, and we are going to put that to a test today. Now, this is the Nokia 9 Pureview, was launched a couple of years ago, the first Pureview device by HMD Global. I think you all should be very familiar with how the device performed. Now, this device was actually launched in a selected markets only and was targeted to a more advanced users. What it does good is it produces one of the best dynamic range in its class when it comes to still photography, especially under adequate lighting or daylight imaging. Nokia 9 Pureview still has one of the best and more natural output. The color is somewhat debatable, but in terms of the details, in terms of the capture, I would say the Nokia 9 Pureview has a very good outcome, especially if you were to compare it with even more premium devices. Now, what is more amazing is that this Pureview setup is unlike any other Pureview setup before. This is the only Pureview with a penta camera setup where all 5 cameras take images together. The sensor used here is not a premium sensor, it's more of a mid-range sensor, but it does produce images which has a lot of rich details, but it does suffers when the amount of lighting goes down. So this is the Nokia 9 Pureview, and after the issues of the Nokia 9 Pureview, Nokia or rather HMD Global went for a more contemporary setup on the Nokia 8.3 5G. So this is a more of a traditional approach of Pureview device. So the Nokia 8.3 5G was done in collaboration with the movie Bond. Unfortunately, due to the pandemic and the delay of the movie, it did not receive the response that it deserved. This is one of the best devices produced by HMD Global in terms of design, build quality, battery life. Everything about the Nokia 8.3 5G is really good. Unfortunately, the software experience has not been that good in terms of having random app crashes, camera not saving images, and the audio issue, which seems to be sort of fixed with the latest security update, but I need more tests to verify on that. But in general, the Nokia 8.3 5G is a fantastic device. Now, when it comes to the camera part of it, the Pureview experience part of it, it has a 64 megapixel primary sensor. It does capture good amount of details under good lighting situation, but it tends to be more noisy once you zoom into the pixels. So we're going to look at all of this when I do the comparison to explain to you more on what I observed from the Nokia 8.3 5G. Now, the highlight of the Nokia 8.3 5G is not the primary camera, but it's ultra-wide. So having had the experience with ultra-wide on the Nokia 7.2 and the Nokia 8.3 5G is a major step up. It's got a large pixel, it absorbs more light. The ultra-wide for the first time was somewhat very much usable, unlike the ones on previous Nokia devices, which is a real game changer. Even the color, the output of the color seems to be slightly different than the primary sensor, where it looks more Lumia-like color, which is really good. But what it does lack is in terms of details. The 12 megapixel ultra wide captures good amount of details, but once you zoom in, you'll notice that the images captured are not exactly sharp, but it's just good for you to do your normal shooting and sharing, nothing to do with printing into large size images and things like that. And the other highlight of the Nokia 8.3 5G has to be its video recording. Now, this has the best video recording ever because this is capable of shooting 4K videos in a more stabilized manner compared to any other Nokia devices. Even the Nokia X30 5G is maxed at 1080p at 60 frames per second, but the Nokia 8.3 5G is able to capture 4K HDR video, which is stabilized from software aspect. So this does not have optical image stabilization. I've shared a video on its performance compared to the Vivo X70 Pro. You can check into my channel. You can see how stabilized the video is even compared to more premium devices. So this is where I think the highlight of the Nokia 8.3 5G is the ultra wide and also the videography. And not to be missed is the low light performance. The low light performance of the Nokia 8.3 5G is simply the best until the recent Night Mode 2.0 was actually launched, which is unfortunately not available for the Nokia 8.3 5G. So till the recent launches of these devices like the Nokia G60 and the Nokia X30 and the Nokia 8.3 5G had the best camera performance when it comes to low light photography on a Nokia device. And finally, we have got the Nokia X30 5G. A lot of things are riding on the Nokia X30 5G. Looks like a device that is a win for HMD Global. A very good premium sensor for the main sensor, and also a new software trick where the ultra-wide now has a combination from both the primary and the ultra-wide sensor to capture a much more sharper image. And also this marks the first return of optical image stabilization on a Pureview setup after the Lumia 950 series. So in today's video, we're going to take a look into how each of these camera differs, how they perform, and I'll leave it to you all to decide which is the one that you prefer. As always, this is my own personal review, my own subjective view on how I look at things, and all of us are entitled to make our own conclusion based on this. So with that said, we're going to start with the Nokia 8.3 and the Nokia 9 Pureview and the Nokia X30 5G's comparison after this. The Nokia 9 Pureview, which is on the left hand side of the screen, to the Nokia X30, which is on the right hand side of the screen. So a couple of things before I describe my observation would be the Nokia 9 Pureview has a penta camera setup. It has 12 megapixel sensors, 3 monochrome, 2 RGB. All 5 sensors take image at the same time, and they use a proprietary fusion technology to unify the final outcome of the image. Now, the good thing is that under bright, intense lighting condition, you get the best out of the camera, because in theory, the images captured can range anywhere between 60 megapixel to up to 300 megapixel. So this is one of the reasons why the Nokia 9 Pureview, despite having a 12 megapixel sensor, can even rival much more higher megapixel count devices. So I did a test a couple of months ago to compare that with the Vivo X70 Pro, and the daylight images on the Nokia 9 Pureview is often sharper than the one on the Vivo X70 Pro. Whereas on the Nokia X30, it relies on a more modern software and also in hardware. So not much of fusion going on from the primary output, but there is a unique fusion algorithm when it comes to the ultra-wide, which I won't be showing here. I'll be showing that more on the Nokia 8.3's comparison. So with that said, this first scene is somewhat of a late evening shot. You can see the sun at the back, and one quick observation that can be seen between both these images are that the images from Nokia X30 tends to be sharper by the Nokia X30 tends to be actually brighter by default, because the sensor is much larger. It's able to capture much more light into it, and this is the common theme when it comes to the images taken from the primary 50 megapixel sensor. So once we zoom into it, then you can see that the Nokia 9 Pureview and the Nokia X30 has some difference. In terms of color accuracy, I'll give this to the Nokia 9 Pureview, much better color here, whereas on the X30 it appears slightly washed out. But in terms of details and all, I think that the Nokia X30 here has much better details. Now, like I said, the Nokia 9 Purview's output heavily depends on the amount of light is available. So the brighter the situation is, the sharper the images can be. So this is one situation where there is enough light, but not enough for it to maximize its full potential. So if you were to look into the sun at the back, this part of the sun, if you look at this, you can see how well defined the details are and how better dynamic range it has compared to the one here, which is slightly blown out. But other than that, in terms of details, a slight sharper on the Nokia X30, but nevertheless, both these images are pretty good. So we're going to go on to the next image to show another observation. So this is late evening. This is around about 7 p.m. Here in Malaysia. So again, this is one situation where you would use the night mode on the Nokia X30, but just to show the amount of light that the sensor absorbs. So this is captured through the primary sensor using the standard mode. So you can see how it fails to contain the lights here at the back. You can see how blown out it is, and the images are generally more brighter. So on the X30 you've got a more true to life image captured, but as you zoom in you can see it does have much noise. So the X30 on the other hand doesn't have the noise that is present on the Nokia 9 Pureview, but pretty much the Nokia 9 Pureview is quite usable even in low light, especially if there is adequate light around it. So this is one other sample here. You can see how the Nokia 9 Pureview is able to contain the highlights here compared to the one on the X30 where it's just blown out. Now I'm not saying that the Nokia X30 is not doing a good job here. It's just to show you what the primary sensor does. I'm very sure that if you were to capture this using a night mode, you'll get a much better results on the X30. So moving on, again, just to highlight what you can capture here. So this is again a late evening image. You can see here individual cars on the street. Compare that to the sorry there. Alright, if you were to zoom in, and you can see how much well defined the details are on the Nokia 9 Pureview, whereas on the X30 is all blown out. Now this is again captured through the primary sensor using the standard mode, not night mode. You'll get much better results with the night mode. This is just to show you how much of light it absorbs and how it fails to contain highlights, something that can be improved through software. Now the other observation that you can make here is the amount of noise. Now the general theme with either Nokia X30 or the G60 is that the amount of sharpening and noise is very much less, which is really something I appreciate. If you were to see here, you can see noise starts to creep in into the Nokia 9 image. There is something that is getting which is more common, especially when the lights gets less. You will see the amount of noise getting more on the Nokia 9 Pureview. Again, if you were to zoom into the center of the image, you see this building here, and if you have it at about the same magnification level, then you can see the noise on the Nokia 9 more apparent compared to the Nokia X30. Now do take note that the Nokia 9 was probably launched about 4 years ago compared to the X30, so it does have an outdated sensor, a mid-range sensor to begin with, compared to the X30, which has a more premium sensor with a much better algorithm. So this is a couple of observations on the low light situation. I'm just going to share some daytime images. I'm just trying to make this video short so it doesn't bore you that much with my observation. Now this is something interesting here. Now this is about probably around 3 or 4 p.m. in the evening, and you can see here how both these devices perform. Now at a glance it looks like the Nokia 9 Pureview has a better dynamic range, which it does. I do think that the dynamic range on the Nokia X30 can be improved even when compared to devices like G60. The dynamic range is slightly below that, and it's definitely something that can be improved with software. But once you zoom in, then you start to notice something else. So you can see that this part of the area is not really brightly lit because it's covered by trees and all that, and then you will now notice a couple of differences between both these images. Now the first being that details on the X30 now looks much sharper. Even the motorbike at the back, you can see how much well defined the outline of the bike is compared to the one on the Nokia 9 Pureview, which appears to be slightly blurred, not much well defined compared to the one on X30. So this is just to show that how much light affects the sensor on the Nokia 9 Pureview, unlike other devices where it doesn't really affect the outcome much, especially the newer generations of sensor where they do absorb a lot of light in, like the ones used on the X30. But you can see just a bit of shadows and all that, then the Nokia 9 Pureview can have some issues in terms of details, and then this is where you see noise creeping into it, and you can see how ill defined the details are. So I'm going to show you another sample where Nokia 9 Pureview actually works to its full capacity, right? So this is one example where right now you have much better lighting throughout. So I'm going to show you how things turn. Now the thing about Nokia 9 Pureview is it is hard to tell when it will work at its full capacity, but when it does produce outstanding image quality and something that can even rival modern devices. So one observation here that I want to share is the color. So this wood here, this is an accurate representation of the color on the Nokia 9 PV on the left, whereas on the X30 this is not the color. So you can see how much different the colors are. Now when you zoom into the number here, 16 and 12, if you were to look at it on the X30, you can see now that the Nokia 9 PVU is sharper. Same goes to these neon lights here, as you can see the wording, and you can see how different it is on the Nokia X30. So the Nokia 9 PVU is able to contain the details on this highlight much better. Unfortunately, this advantage that you see in daylight images doesn't really translate throughout. So Nokia 9 is heavily dependent on the amount of light. The more light you get, the better the outcome, especially under daylight images condition. Then you get brilliant image quality, but that's about it. Pretty much it doesn't really do much better in low light situations. So even here you can see how well defined the edges are compared to the one on the X30. So this is from a 12 megapixel sensor, and this is from a 50 megapixel quad bay sensor. So the Nokia 9 PureView technology is something that is good, something that should be optimized, but I don't think we will see any other device like it anytime soon. So I'm just going to show you one other sample before I move on to the comparison between Nokia 8.3 and the Nokia X30. So let's just see one other image. So just have a look at this image. The same thing we do it on the Nokia X30. So yep, now this is just to show you the color on the Nokia X30, which can tend to be slightly warmer. It does depend on the AI algorithm, but generally the color, especially when it comes from the primary sensor, tends to be slightly more warmer and quite similar to the ones on the Nokia XR20. I don't really like this type of color. Of course, this is my own personal preference. Some people do prefer this type of color tone, but to me, I prefer a slightly neutral color, especially when it comes to images like these. I won't say the Nokia 9 has a more accurate color, but it is closer to how it actually was compared to the Nokia X30, whereas in the Nokia X30 is just all blown out and you get this awful looking green, which isn't really nice to me. But once you zoom into these images, you can see the amount of noise on the X30. Details are somewhat better on the X30 now. Sorry, the amount of noise on the Nokia 9, but details are slightly better on the X30, as you can see here. Some preservation of some details at the lower part of this structure, which is not available on the Nokia 9 Pureview. So this is just a brief comparison of daylight images between the Nokia X30 and the Nokia 9 Pureview. Now, if you ask me what would I prefer the colors of the Nokia 9 Pureview compared to the X30. The X30's color output can definitely be improved with future software updates. I prefer details from the Nokia X30 because it tends to be more natural, less sharpening, less noise. But just to see at the glance, the Nokia 9 PU, despite being a very old device, it is still capable of producing good image under adequate lighting condition. So This is the first half of the comparison between the Nokia 9 and the Nokia X30. So we're going to look into the Nokia 8.3 and the Nokia X30 shortly. So this is going to be the comparison between Nokia 8.3, which is on the left hand side of the screen, compared to the Nokia X30 on the right hand side of the screen. Now this is both from the primary sensor. The primary sensor is 64 megapixel quad bay on the 8.3 versus 50 on the X30. At a glance it looks slightly about the same, but I would say that this has somewhat of a cooler tone compared to the Nokia X30. Now which one do I prefer? This is hard to say because they are generally about the same. But if you were to look at the ground here, if you look at the roads, this is an accurate representation of the color of the road, whereas it is totally obliterated here on the X30. So the color output of the X30 is somewhat not up to the mark. But in terms of details, I would say they both do a good job under equal or almost equal magnification. You can see the amount of details present on both is quite good, and the X30 tends to be a tad sharper. Here you can see the details of the leaves here, much well preserved. As you go up to the building, and you can see the X30 having a much sharper image here. Now the thing about the Nokia 8.3 is that in general the output, while good, it does carry a lot of noise with it. I'll show you in a while. Now this is the ultra-wide. So first we're going to look into the color shift between the two, and you can already observe how slightly different the color output are between both these devices. I mean both these modes. To me, my personal observation is that the ultra-wide output has slightly more vibrant capture, something in the likes of Lumia series, so something that I really like, and it does have one of the best ultra-wide capture among previous generations of Nokia devices. Now what's going to be interesting in this is that the ultra-wide of the Nokia 8.3 is at 12 megapixel using a 1 micron size pixel, which is quite large to bring in more lights. This is one thing that I really like about the ultra-wide, because it doesn't have the aggressive sharpening and noise that is available or present on the primary sensor. Whereas what's unique on the X30 is that it now has this fusion technology to capture images from both the primary and the ultra-wide and combine to give a sharper ultra-wide output. So this is the X30 on the right hand side of the screen. Can you notice any shift in the color? Yes, you can. I would say that the Nokia X30's ultra-wide is slightly more vibrant than its primary sensor here. So let's zoom into the details to see what we can. The differences between both these devices. Under the same magnification, you can see here. Now a bit more noisy compared to the one on the 8.3, because now this image is slightly sharper. The same thing you can see here. The ultra-wide on the Nokia 8.3 tends to be slightly more on the softer side, which is actually something that I prefer. But in terms of sharpness, in terms of details, then of course the X30 has an edge here because of its fusion. But invariably it will now introduce noise, as you can see around the leaves. You can see the level of noise, and you can even see it in the buildings here once you zoom in. So yes, it is sharper. Yes, the fusion works, but it tends to be slightly noisier if you were to zoom in. But this is the entire idea of the ultra-wide capture, to have a sharper image, which would invariably introduce some noise. But in general, both these devices has really good ultra-wide capture. I really like them. I really actually like the Nokia 8.3's ultra-wide captures. It's one of the best thing about the Nokia 8.3. Now let's move on to the next sample here. Before that, just a daytime portrait mode. Now I prefer the portrait mode of the Nokia X30. It is more natural, the colors are more accurate, whereas the X30 introduces a lot of contrast, a lot of aggressive sharpening, a lot of noise that is not really quite usable for me. Of course it is okay for general usage, but images tends to be more natural, colors tends to be more accurate with the Nokia X30, something that I even noticed on the Nokia G60. And I can confidently say this, when it comes to portrait mode, both the G60 and the X30 have the best portrait mode ever on any Nokia device. It's an easy win for them, and I would say that the Nokia X30's advantage over the G60 would be a much better color representation, and you can see that in my previous video comparing both of them. So in terms of sharpening, I would say the one on the 8.3 is sharper thanks to all this aggressive sharpening of the center image and aggressive blurring of the background. So something that I really don't like about the Nokia 8.3, and something that has not changed since its launch earlier. Let's go to the next image. This is a low light image test. Now X30 has a new low light image algorithm, the night mode 2.0. In my previous comparison, I've said that with the night mode 2.0, you've got sharper image, you've got more vibrant colors, and you've got a much more pleasant outcome. Now this is a real test of what the night mode 2.0 is compared to the improved night mode on the Nokia 8.3. Low light imaging on the Nokia previous Nokia devices started with a couple of devices back from 8.1 to Nokia 7.2. They all have their own ways of sorting out the night mode, but it peaked at the Nokia 8.3 because now the Nokia 8.3 has an improved outcome when it comes to the low light images, something that you've not seen before. And prior to the launch of the X30 series and the G60, the 8.3 has the best low light capture on a Nokia device. So it's going to be interesting to see how they both fare, and at a glance you can already see how vibrant the output is on the X30, and you can see how sharper it is as well. So you can see much better preserved details here. Colors are more vibrant, something that you're going to be seeing more frequently on the X30. Moving on, this is just another sample here. So again, you can see much brighter capture on the X30 compared to the Nokia 8.3 here. Both actually did quite good, but the X30 is definitely much brighter. And in terms of details, I would say X30 has better preservations of the details. You can see some noise creeping in into the X30, sorry, into the 8.3, whereas it's well preserved on the X30. So this is through the primary sensor. So the next, we're going to take a look into ultrawide at night. Both of them do have night mode for the ultrawide capture. Of course, the ultrawide on the X30 also has a fusion capture. Now, one thing to be noticed here is that the output is generally brighter on the X30, but it seems like it fails to contain the highlights. You can see how well contained the highlights are on the 8.3, but it's all blown out on the X30. If you were to zoom at the sides, you will see the same outcome. You can see a better containment of the lights here compared to the X30. But in general, both of them look actually pretty good. The brighter image here would be X30. I would say in terms of details, X30 has a sharper outcome here. Now let's move on to the next one. Again, this is about the same image. Okay, let's go to this scene. Alright, so this is another sample of the primary capture. Now you can see again the same theme, much brighter capture on the X30, slightly less on the 8.3. When you zoom in, you can see that slightly more noise on the X30, but in general it does have a I would say slightly sharper image compared to the 8.3. You can see the leaves here. If I were to zoom in, you can see the leaves here compared to the leaves here. So the problem with when you have sharpening is you tend to introduce noise, and which is apparent here compared to the one on the 8.3. But these are all things that you look into once you zoom in. So you're not going to do much of zooming in unless you want to find minor subtle changes between both. But I would say both are actually quite good, but of course the X30 has a better output. So this is again an ultra wide on the X30, on the 8.3 and the X30. So once you go to the ultra wide, you can see this compared to the ultra wide here. So let me pick a same frame. So this is somewhat the same, I would say. So yep. Okay, so we pick one here and we pick one here. Now you can see how the fusion works. So with the fusion, you've got a sharper central image. You can see how much well preserved the images are. You can see the details, you can see the fans. But on the X8.3, you can see how ill-defined it is. Same goes here to the bridge here. You can see how much well preserved the details are compared to the one on the 8.3. So this is something good about the new fusion, which even works in the ultra wide even for night mode. You can see, let's see this. Yep. Okay, so if you were to zoom into the details, you can see pretty much good details preserved at the center of the image. Here you can see the rooftop here, the details here compared to the 8.3. So in general, the major improvement of the night mode 2.0 over the 8.3 is it is a brighter output, it's got a sharper output, colors are more vibrant. I'll show you one more sample here. If you were to look into this, and if you were to look into this, if you see this plastic house, this inflatable house here, you will notice all the differences that I said. You've got a sharper image, you've got a brighter image, and you've got an image which is more vibrant compared to the 8.3. So a really good night mode 2.0, something that can rival even the premium device out there. Now this is something I like to share. Now this is the night portrait on the X30. I'm unable to capture a night portrait mode on the 8.3 because it fails to save the images. So this is just a front-facing camera capture at night. So I'm going to show the same here on both these devices. Now if you were to zoom in, you'll see that the X30 is having a much more accurate representation of the skin tone, doesn't have any aggressive sharpening, and you will see that I would say when it comes to the amount of details, I would say that the one on the 8.3 is better in a sense that it has sharpening going on. This is the thing that I don't like about 8.3 because it sharpens the foreground image and then tries to blur the background image, but this is not the portrait mode, so this is just the front facing camera. So you can see the sharpening going on, whereas on the X30 you don't see that happening. The outcome would be slightly better once the night mode is the night portrait is on. So this is the night portrait is on, and you can see how much more natural the image outcome is. But unfortunately I can't show the sample here with the 8.3 because it fails to save the image. So I'm going to move on to the next one. This is the portrait mode from the front facing camera. So some interesting findings here. One would be the color. So this is the more accurate color representation from the X30 compared to 8.3. So when it comes to color, the X30 nails this, and you can also see this. You can see that the X30 has a much shallow focus when it comes to portrait mode, so it tends to focus more on the foreground subject, whereas on the 8.3 you can see it is still sharper or slightly even in the background. before it really cuts out. And you can see how more pleasant it looks on the X30 compared to the 8.3, and once you zoom in you can see this. So this is something that I don't like about the 8.3, is the amount of noise it introduces in the portrait mode, which will look horrible on the skin tone. I can show you this as well. If you were to zoom into this and this, you'll get the idea of what I'm saying. You can see how much of noise the image has compared to the one on the X30. So something that I wish Nokia did something about, but probably that's not going to happen. Now the interesting thing now is this. Let's move on to the end of the image here. So these are just a couple of images. So this image is taken under complete dark environment. This is to show you what the dark vision can do and how much the dark vision is compared to the Nokia 8.3. Now this is the dark vision on the 8.3 X30. This is the night mode on the 8.3. You can see the Nokia 8.3 struggles and introduces so much of noise into the image, whereas the one on the X30 is pretty much usable, something shareable. That's how much the dark vision helps on the X30. Another sample here, if I were to show you the next sample, you can see this better. Again, the 8.3 struggles trying to capture whatever light it could, whereas on the on the X30 you can see the magnificent details preserved, very much usable. And this is a complete dark environment that even the 8.3 with its superior hardware back in the days has struggled to capture the details. So something same, just the same. This is again to show you how the night mode works on both these devices. A much more brighter, much more detailed output compared to the one on the on the 8.3. So in essence, the Nokia 8.3 did have one of the best night modes, but that title now belongs to X30, and even the G60 dark vision works brilliantly well on the X30. I do hope to see some software update for the G60 to fix the dark vision output. And I'm going to end this video showing the video comparison of both these devices so that we can conclude whether or not the OIS helps. So with that, I'll see you in my next video. Do take care and stay safe.
Ini